Welcome to Struck by Science, a podcast of the Polish Academy of Sciences Center in Vienna.
Hello, everybody. My name is Piotr Szlanta. I'm director of Scientific Center of the Polish Academy of Sciences. In Vienna, I would like to invite you to our next podcast dedicated to the process of European unification. And at the beginning, I would like to introduce to you our today guest. Sebastian Schäffer is director of the Institute for the Danube Region and Central European, IDM, a regional think tank based here in Vienna. He's also Secretary General of the Danube Rectors Conference, DRC, a network of more than 60 universities in the wider Danube region. In 2011, the Munich-born political scientist founded CCSSC Europe, a competence network for seminars, simulation, and academic policy advice. Schäffer has worked as a lecturer and research assistant at many universities and institutions in Germany, where he also obtained 2 master's degrees, one from Slavistic, as far as I know. His area of expertise include European integration, EU enlargement, and future scenarios. He's the author of more than 100 articles and essays, has written and edited several books, including Ukraine, Central and Eastern Europe. So, welcome on the board. Sebastian would like to add something about you and maybe about your institution. I'm very glad that my center cooperate with you on many fields. Tomorrow we have a conference on local autonomy. So, if you would like to add something about you personally and IDM.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on this podcast. It's especially for me great that we continue the cooperation that you already mentioned. And also, of course, I mean, it's always nice to speak with friends about a topic that is very dear to me. So this is really something that I'm looking forward to. I don't think there's anything necessary to add to myself. And I think we should dive right into the topics, which is much more interesting than my CV.
Okay, but you mentioned that this topic is has special meaning for you. So may I ask why? Why are you interested in the Balkan Peninsula and this integration process?
Well, I already started during my studies. It's right. I also did have as one of my subjects Slavonic studies, but I mainly studied political science. And in this combination, I already looked at the development on the Western Balkans. Also because my grandparents on my father's side, they are from what now today is Serbia. Back then was Austro-Hungary, actually. And this was something that I found interesting already during my studies, and it sort of stuck with me. And I was always then, even after I wrote my master thesis on the stabilization and association agreements with Serbia and Montenegro, already separated at that time. I stayed interested in the topic, and then through various channels and detours, I ended up at the IDM here in Vienna, and now I can do that professionally and not only out of academic curiosity.
Okay, so we have also more in common because my grandparents also come from the former Austro-Hungary, but the other part of empire from Galicia. So as I'm historian, so let's start maybe about the history, about the genesis of this process. So when did the Western Balkan states begin to apply for membership of the Union? As we know, in 1990s, I remember good, there was a bloody decade in the history of especially Western Balkans. Then some democratic changes. So when this idea started to be discussed among the Western Balkan societies. Could you say something about that, Sebastian?
Yeah, well, we already need a historian to look back at this because it's more than 2 decades ago. If we look at, as you mentioned, there was the I would say it did really start with the violent breakup, because it was clear from the European Union side that they are not able to deal with this development in their backyard. And so what they did was reform the treaties. And then since then, we also have a high representative for the common foreign and security policy. And this started in the middle of the 1990s, 1997 Treaty of Amsterdam. And with this already, it was looking towards the role of the European Union in uniting the continent, and here also then in the Western Balkans. And then a decisive date, I would say, was 2003, the so-called Summit of Thessaloniki. And here, the European Union member countries promised all former Yugoslav countries plus Albania that they can join the European Union when they fulfill the Copenhagen criteria. And then subsequently after that, the countries of what we call now the Western Balkans have applied for membership very early on. Croatia, very early on also, back then the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, now North Macedonia, both 2005. And up till now, every country in the Western Balkans has applied for it, for membership. But we have, with the exception of Croatia, not succeeded to integrate any country yet. We might have to make a small exception, although my Slovenian colleagues don't like to hear that they are subsumed under Western Balkans, because if we want to be very precise, Slovenia, as a former Yugoslav part republic, has joined the European Union already in 2004. So they actually started in the middle of the 1990s with that integration, and are now a full member already since 2004.
Okay, so together with my country, with Poland. So what alternatives to European Union memberships are available to the Western Balkan countries? So should a common strategy be pursued, or would individual approaches make more sense for each country? Because there are different countries with different social strata, a little bit history, religious. So which kind of the policy should be pursued in that, according to you, in this process?
You asked a very good question, but I will have to give a very complicated answer. I'll try to structure it a bit, because there is not one straightforward. So on the one hand side, is there an alternative? If you would ask for my personal opinion, I would say no, there is no alternative. But of course, if we want to talk about democratic processes, there should always be an alternative. Yeah. So in theory, there are things discussed, especially since for the past 21 years, since that summit in Thessaloniki, not much has been achieved in those countries, but also from the side of the EU. Alternatives that are discussed is, for instance, that we have a so-called staged accession. So we would start with only very basic access to EU funding, only very basic access to decision-making. You would not have a veto. And the more you progress in the accession process, the more stages you would advance. This is one of the prominent suggestions that are out there. It's been developed by a think tank from Belgrade together with Brussels. And this is also more or less the official position of, for instance, the Austrian Foreign Ministry. There are other ideas. We have seen that, for instance, we do only economic integration, but not political integration. Yeah, so give access to the common market, but not to the decision-making structures. This is something that another think tank, the European Stability Initiative, is very vocal on.
But
I myself
if I can interrupt, but it
Sure.
looks like any kind of the protectorate. So, and unequal treaty of these Balkan states, just to join European economic region, not taking part in the making decision about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And this is why I say I'm not convinced by those alternatives, because I mean we made them wait. They also have we have to be realistic. Not every country has made the progress in the past 21 years that they could have made with regards to European integration. If we think about for instance your country, or also Austria. Austria is also not a funding member. Austria joined in 1995. They applied in 1989. So from application to accession, it was 6 years. And the actual negotiations were only a bit more than a year. And we are negotiating now with certain countries, for instance, North Macedonia. We are negotiating for almost 2 decades. Yeah? Next year we will have negotiated with them 2 decades, and we have not started the actual process because it has been blocked on the way by EU member states, because it's very easy for member states to veto on the very step of the way. So
yes, for
maybe
many years this process was blockaded on Greece, and in the last year
exactly.
by Bulgaria, which
Yeah,
claimed
exactly.
it is part of the Bulgarian cultural heritage.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's also proof how difficult was the history of Balkan Peninsula, and this nation-making process. Maybe it's not still in progress, but it was just very difficult in the 20th century to build a modern European nation on the area where before for more than 400 years, so Turks was Turkish, and then came authoritarian interwar period, and then after Second World War, of course, a communistic regime. So and that's correct that the negotiation, which lasted over 2 decades, could make this process a little bit not so popular among the societies among the North Macedonians. But are there any significant opponents of this European project? Any political or social groups objecting the joining of European Union? I'm not talking not only about North Macedonia, but for example Serbia, which has traditional, very strong, maybe not economic, but political and emotional links, for example, to Russia. It's just
Yeah.
obvious. So
Yeah. May I just come back to a part of the question before, because what you mentioned with the countries blocking due to the history and the development, this is also a danger if we do not give access to all Western Balkan countries at the same time. Because I see if we would have, Montenegro now is very ambitious. They say they want to join by 2028. They're a small country. It's 400,000 people. Yeah, this is not anything that the EU itself would have to be concerned about. But a danger is definitely if they are not joining together with the others, we might have additional possibilities to veto, extort, etc. And this might even make the process longer and more frustrating. And then these groups that you were asking for, even political parties that oppose that, of course, gain ground and additional momentum. What is very dangerous in the development, for instance, in Serbia, as you mentioned, is that for the first time, I think it was in 2020, for the first time, a majority of the population was against EU membership. Because if you look at Eurobarometer data from the past decades, you would always see in all Western Balkan countries, a majority was for European integration. And in Serbia, this is no longer the case. And this is due to the fact what you have mentioned, that of course there's a very traditional connection to the Russian Federation. The experience from the 1999 NATO Operation Allied Force, but also due to the development of Alexander Vučić. If you look at him, how he has more or less captured the state, rebranded the political system, shifted towards a presidential system, and things like that. I think this would not have happened if we would have been better from the EU member state side to actually provide a perspective and provide a possibility of integration. And I mean, Eurosceptic parties are also now the norm within the European Union, and they're even in the European Parliament. And therefore, of course, you also have them in the Western Balkan region. We see a rise of Euroscepticism here. And of course, the people get frustrated because, I mean, who wants to do something if you tell your child, look, you do a chore, you clean your room, and in 20 years, maybe you get a benefit out of it. He will, of course, or she will not do it. Yeah, you need a tangible timeline for a result. And we have not been offering this, and this is definitely to 50% also the fault of the EU and especially the member states.
Okay, so Serbians are just disappointed, by this prolongation of this percent and no clear perspective of the date of joining European Union. So it comes to me the example of Turkey. So just Turkey started in 1960s the process for European integration. I think that joined this common economic market in middle of 1980s, as far as I'm right. And now so under the president Erdogan, they conducted other way, and there is no sign of interest of joining of Turkey to European Union. But the other question is that if, because I'm honestly speaking, I'm also not especially a fan of Serbia membership of the European Union. Why? Because it's a country, as we already mentioned, both with strong ties with Russia. They has bills to settle with the US. I can imagine there are still strong resentment against the NATO. So I couldn't, for example, so many, maybe not many, but three Balkan, Western Balkan countries are member of NATO. It's Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Albania. So I couldn't imagine that Serbia will join NATO in future. But this country, as you mentioned, it make a few steps back in the process of democratization. Yeah, for example, in December 2023, there was a parliamentary election which won Serbian Progressive Party, winning almost 50% of the vote. The vote was almost immediately marred by accusation of irregularities. The International Election Observation Mission said in a statement that, I quote after BBC, serious irregularities, including vote buying and the ballot box stuffing, were observed. So the question is if Serbia is in contemporary state of affairs just ready to be in European Union. So
here I can give you a very simple answer, because it's no, they're not. But the major question that follows this is, does that mean that we should simply accept that? Yeah, and here I believe through European integration, because as you rightly described, there is a lot of challenges, especially in the region, and then we haven't even talked about the Kosovo issue, which is also there. But what European integration historically has shown is that it's very good in transforming former conflicts into at least a partnership. And this was in the very beginning of European integration, the German-French reconciliation, but also exactly then later on after 1989, German-Polish reconciliation, but also things like what we forget, South Tyrol, yeah, is a non-issue because everybody profits from speaking two languages, having two passports, being in the European Union, giving opportunities. What we've seen is that, for instance, Northern Ireland, the conflict was flaring up when the UK left the European Union. And I think that the tension that we have also seen coming up again on the Serbian-Kosovo border would be prevented if they would be part of the European Union. And many of the challenges and discussions that are ongoing there would be alleviated, license plates on cars. They would just have their European license plates, and then there's RS or KS on it, and it doesn't matter anymore. I would believe that this is not going to be an issue anymore if they would be part of the European Union. But the big challenge here is, as you rightly described, Serbia and the current Serbian administration is not ready for it. So we need to assist in the transformation. We need to give a better incentive, but at the same time, and we should not forget this, we also need to have security mechanisms on the EU level to deal with democratic backsliding if that happens again. Because what we observe also since the past 5 years is that there are countries that have joined the European Union, but they are rolling back democratic development. And this is also something that we haven't seen. The Freedom House Index, it's a US-based NGO that analyzes the transformation of countries and divides them into free, partially free, and non-free since the 1970s. And if you look at the history of countries that joined the European Union, they went from unfree to partially free to free, because only free countries, of course, can join the European Union. And but we have one incident in the history since 2020 when a country fell back to partially free, and that's Hungary. And European integration so far prevented this, but obviously the mechanisms within the European Union are not strong enough to counter that if somebody is really serious on drawing back democratic development. And so therefore we need a twofold approach. We need to make sure that Serbia can be part of a European future, honestly communicate that also to the population, because then we would probably see different results coming out of elections. And we need to reform the European Union to be ready should there be something wrong with an integrated country, that we prevent democratic backsliding.
Okay, so you also mentioned in your speech about the different actors on the Balkan Peninsula, and traditional Balkan Peninsula was a playground of so-called great powers, and it's still the factor now. So to what extent, according to you, could geopolitical factors such as increasingly influence of Russia and China in that region accelerate or just slow down this process of European enlargement in Western Balkans? Are China and Russia active in that part of the world?
Absolutely, we see that. And this is, of course, a huge challenge, because if we simply look at the geography, the EU member countries surround the Western Balkans. Yeah? So this is in the middle of the European Union. It's not the backyard; it's the courtyard. But we neglect it. We treat it as a backyard. And here I really see the problem, because the certain void is filled with Russian and Chinese, but also Turkish propaganda. And it is propaganda, because if you look at it, in simple terms, again, I mean, Serbia is still the biggest country in that region. So, but it's also the one that stands out here. When Xi Jinping visited Belgrade, you could see these huge Chinese flags everywhere and welcoming and whatsoever. If someone from the EU comes, you will not see giant EU flags. But if we look at terms of foreign direct investment, also, for instance, during the pandemic, there was a lot of praising from Alexander Vucic towards China for helping so much. But if you look at actual numbers, we are, from the side of the European Union, disproportionately more invested and helped in Serbia than China and Russia combined. But the realization in the country and also in its people is completely different, because the propaganda coming from the Kremlin and coming from Beijing is so much better than the European Union is selling itself and its engagement in the region. And if we are not getting better in this, we lose more and more this momentum. And I mean, European Union membership doesn't prevent that you have also good relations to other countries. It really doesn't. But do we want to have a dominant role from Moscow and Beijing in the middle of the continent, more or less? Because, as I said, we surround it. It's not going to go away. Geography is not going to go away, and we need to be aware of this fact.
Okay. And how does the accelerated European Union accession process of Ukraine, a state which is at war now, and Moldova influence the accession prospect of Western Balkan countries and the candidate status? Does this lead to tension or competition between the countries in the region? I also I ask you this question because I remember the situation in 1990s when, for example, the Czech Republic, public opinion, Czech Republic, or political elite were convinced that Czech society is more prepared to join European Union, and there is no need to just waiting for this for Poles or for the Slovak entities was one of the reason of breaking up of Czechoslovakia. Is there any competition because between these Western Balkan countries in this race to the European Union?
Definitely. I mean, if we look at it, that you see, I mean, you know, that I personally, but also the IDM has been very much supporting the Ukraine since the Russian aggression. But what I really have to say is it's a dangerous signal that the European Union, and here Ursula von der Leyen, sends that when there is a violent escalation, or another country is attacking you, or there's war brought to your country, that this suddenly makes you eligible for being fast-tracked, more or less, to the candidate status, not to membership. There's no fast-track procedure to membership, because you need to fulfill the Copenhagen criteria. But if you would have asked anyone in Brussels on the 23rd of February 2022, should Ukraine and Moldova become candidate countries in June 2022 and have candidate status by December 2023, they would have all said, "No, are you crazy? This is impossible." And again, I mean, they deserve that, because I think we should have honestly communicated when we started the Eastern Partnership that this is also a possibility that they will become an EU member country in the future. But if you have a country that is waiting for 21 years, that's something, yeah. And then you see that another country is getting the same thing in 21 months, of course that create, I mean, the signal is, okay, if we have war and conflict, then they will look at us, and then they finally will care about us, which happened actually when we look back at this process. The European Union was looking towards the Western Balkans when there was a war, and then we sort of forgot it. And this is dangerous, and I see also a danger because there will be countries that will be advocating that we cannot give preferential treatment to Ukraine or Moldova, which is correct. But if you make it a condition that they cannot move faster if they are doing better than others, that will again slow down the overall process, because then we will only move as fast as the slowest country. And if you look at, we talked about Serbia, but if we look at Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I think it's going to be very complicated under the Dayton Treaty for them to become an EU member country, and we say we cannot give preferential treatment to anyone. We need to make sure that all countries are treated equally and progress equally. Then we probably also in 20 years will talk about the candidates from the Western Balkan countries and not the members from the Western Balkan countries.
Okay, so you mentioned about Bosnia and Herzegovina. I wanted also to talk about this each country specific, of course, but we know of this bloody history of the civil war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Why this Dayton Treaty status and this complicated political system in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and still existing, as far as I know, this tension between these three main nationalities in that country, how this influence upon this process of integration of Bosnia and Herzegovina into European Union? Is this country also fit for that, if they couldn't deal with each other properly, and that there is lack of the common identity? Maybe I'm wrong. You are specialist on that issue.
I would believe again here that European integration would help to alleviate these problems, because ultimately, if we have more supranationality, there is no need for subnational entities to go their own way. I mean, Dodik is a special case, and he's a populist, and he wants to play with fire. But I think the overall situation in the Republika Srpska as a part of a Bosnian EU member country would be so much different than it is right now, because it wouldn't matter so much anymore. You would be looking you can look for your regional cohesion funds within the European Union. You can develop. You don't have to develop against other entities in your state. If we look at, for instance, the development in the reunited Germany, the new states, they had the possibility also through European integration to develop, not necessarily on the expense of other of the older states. Even if Bavaria, I'm originally from Bavaria, so I can say that even if Bavaria would argue like this, but I don't think that Bavaria is worse off than they have been before the German reunification. And so here I see a possible solution for this. But of course, as the state is structured in Bosnia and Herzegovina at the moment, it's impossible, because we at the moment have also the high representative there that ultimately can decide on vetoing laws. And of course, you cannot have such an institution in a country that is a EU member country. So at least the position of the high representative in Bosnia and Herzegovina would have to cease to exist. But Without it, the current structure in the political system might not survive. So this is again a catch-22. Yeah? We cannot reform, therefore we cannot enlarge. Is the overall mantra. So if we don't reform, we will not have new member countries. If we block reforms, that blocks the whole process. And in a small microcosmos, that is also true for Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Okay, so is it according to you probably that Bosnia-Herzegovina will reform this complicated, ineffective political system in this process of European integration, so before they will join European Union? Because I'm also afraid that, of course, this process, so European integration could elevate this conflict, but also when this conflict are on the high level, I would say, we also risk the import of this conflict into the European Union.
Yeah. I think without at least accompanied process, I wouldn't say parallel necessarily, but an accompanied process of reforming the state structure while at the same time integrating into the European Union, it will be very hard to do so. But without the change, I don't see how they would be able to fulfill the Copenhagen criteria. And yes, you are right. I mean, we have counter arguments for what I said, that European integration transforms conflicts. If we look, for instance, at Cyprus, it did not transform the conflict towards a reunification of the island. It did also not escalate, but there seems to be certain limitations to a point where when we have a certain entity not being part officially of the European Union. Yeah, of course, the whole island is part, but the Northern Cyprus structures are not part of the European Union. And here, if we see that in the Western Balkans, that, for instance, we would have maybe Bosnia and Herzegovina makes it, but we cannot have Serbia. Serbia will continue to destabilize through the Republika Srpska that country. And so, therefore, what we would need is an integration of the whole region all at once with a supranational structure that prevents any destabilization and deterioration of democratic structures in countries.
No, it doesn't make sense. So we talk already about the great powers, about European Union states, neighbors of the region such as Turkey. But let's move to the society. What role can civil society, youth movement play in the European Union integration process on the Western Balkan of the Western Balkan countries? And as well, so many from the European Union live hundreds of thousands of immigrants from that region. Yeah, for example, in Austria, I think about 2% of the society, maybe not two, but most surely over 1%, are Serbians. And of course, Switzerland is not the European Union members, but there is 2% of inhabitants as people from Kosovo and Albania. So what role play in this process civil society in this and youth movement, and also this diaspora in European Union?
We have here a of course important role, but as you mentioned, over the past 2 decades, of course, a lot of them have already left. So and there are studies, if you look at migration, the probability that you will move back decreases steeply after 2 years. So those people that already moved to the European Union from those regions, they will most likely not return because they were tired of waiting. And this is, of course, a big danger, because what we also see in analysis is that the diaspora doesn't necessarily make it easier for the other people from their home country to also emigrate or even integrate into the European Union. Yeah? So we see that there is a strong tendency also amongst Western Balkan societies in EU member countries that are actively supporting anti-European developments in their country. As paradoxical as it sounds, we have still this window of opportunity, I would call it. For instance, if we look at Moldova, we saw in the recent presidential election and also the EU referendum, when they changed the constitution, that the diaspora tipped that. But the longer that will take, the longer that process will take, I am convinced that also the stance of the diaspora here will change. And this is something where we also have to be very careful that we don't miss that window of opportunity or have this deterioration of support from the diaspora, but then also from the societies in those countries. And especially, I mean, again, you need to give a perspective. Yeah? If you tell a young person now, okay, you need to endure the complicated reform process, but in year X, this will be finished, this is realistic, and then you are a member, and then you don't have to necessarily move to another country because you will have the possibility to develop yourself in your own country. If we don't provide this perspective, then and honestly, not, it doesn't help if we say, okay, until 2030, until 2035. No, we need to have a clear plan. Look, in this year, we move this and that forward, and this is realistic, and this is possible. And if we continue like this, then you will be a member at the end of that process. If we look historically, we did an analysis here at IDM in a policy paper that we published in, I think, June, and we looked at all negotiations in the history of enlargement of the European Union, or even European communities back in the time. All successful, the average length of negotiation, not applying for membership and then becoming a member, that's a longer process, but just opening and then finally closing all chapters. The average negotiation process lasted for 3.5 years. So it is doable in even a term, a mandate of a government to start and to finish negotiations. That was possible. We did that with countries like Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. Yeah? We can compare that to Moldova. Of course, Moldova has had a different development over the past 30 years, but the starting point for Estonia, Moldova, Lithuania, and Latvia was more or less the same size, part of the Soviet Union, etc. And also, if we look at the Western Balkan countries, again, yes, there has been several big and bloody wars. But if we look at the history of European integration in the very beginning, there was the bloodiest war that we have experienced so far on the continent. And after 20 years, in the 1960s, Germany definitely was a economic motor and stable country within the European communities. And this should have. Why would it have been different also for the countries of the Western Balkans? Why should they not be able to also have such a development in this time period? And then again, we come to our failures and their failures. That's the explanation for it. But I still believe that theoretically it would have been possible to have them already now as EU member countries, and thriving economic societies.
Okay, you also mentioned about Baltic states, which started from the similar niveau. All of the Baltic states already introduced are members of also not only of European Union and NATO, but also Eurozone. So what challenges and opportunities do the Western Balkan countries face in terms of joining the Eurozone, and how does monetary union affect their economic stability in long-term period?
Yeah, that is also a very interesting picture if we look at the different countries, because, for instance, we have already two countries that use the euro, Montenegro and Kosovo, because the European Union never, so officially they're not sanctioning it or preventing it, because it really wouldn't make sense for them to de-introduce the euro, and then reintroduce it when they become a member. So they simply accept that situation. So for them, it would be fairly easy, at least on a nominal um, uh, perspective. Of course, you need to fulfill again also certain criteria, the so-called Maastricht criteria, and here it's the GDP per capita debt ratio, not have a huge movement within your interest rates and things like that. And of course, this is challenging, especially in times of high inflation. We still have it's not hyperinflation, but it's still a fairly high inflation if we look at the average. This year in Austria, we still will have roughly 3.5% of inflation, which is almost double the amount that we have on average in the past decades. And so this of course makes it very, very challenging. And then also, I think there's an additional, and not only fiscal and economic aspect to it, but also a psychological effect in the societies, because I still hear people in Germany even complaining that the euro made everything so much more expensive, which is absolutely not true for the majority of the goods and services. Especially if you look at if you compare it to prices 20 years ago in mark. But when you have a already difficult economic situation and then you introduce the euro, this will make it also very there will be this psychological effect, to always compare it to the last time you paid in your old currency. And of course, everything was cheaper when you look back, simply because prices develop over years. And here this can contribute to Euroscepticism and frustration with European integration. But the so to say good thing is it's not a requirement, and of course you know that because Poland also has not introduced the euro yet. It's you at a certain point you have to, you have to, because it's part of the acquis communautaire, but there's no time limit if you don't. And there's even worse if you look at Sweden. They do that even longer now, because they held a referendum, and they voted against the introduction of the euro, although they, from the acquis communautaire perspective, they would have to introduce it. And so now they artificially don't fulfill the criteria of the so-called exchange rate mechanism 2, which only then, if you remain 2 years in that, you're allowed to introduce the common currency.
So it's also just excuse, yeah, to postpone this. this process. So at the end of our talk, I would like to ask you about the religious issue, because so Western Balkans is very diverse region what religious concerns. So how does the religious diversity of the Western Balkans influence the region's political and social dynamics and its integration into the European Union? Are these uh, churches, this religious group, not only churches, but just religious group, are part of this public dispute about the European perspective? If so, how influence this, let's clergy or religious people that process?
What we have to say is that the church in many countries is an actor, is a political actor. We could see, for instance, in Montenegro, we had a fairly stable government for 30 years, because Milo Đukanović was either prime minister or president since 1991 until 2020. What he absolutely underestimated was the role of the church. And when he was going against certain church privileges, that actually led to the downfall of his government, and he was voted out of office. So that made it for Montenegro, I would say, a bit more complicated on the way to European integration, because Đukanović was government change is healthy, especially in a democracy. But he led the country into NATO, and he probably, if he would have, and then also at a certain point finally led this transition in his own party, also led the country into the European Union. Right now, it's a bit more complicated, and I think it set the country back, as absurd as it might sound, through this government change that was based basically on where one of the root causes was the Montenegrin and the Serbian Orthodox Church. The Serbian Orthodox Church is a huge player in Serbia. I would say similar to what we see in the Russian Federation. There, of course, it's even more, and the Moscow Patriarchy is the driving political actor also then into the region. But this is something that is definitely not to be neglected. And then we have, of course, Catholicism, we have Islam, and here culminating Orthodoxy, Catholicism, and Islam in one country, which is Bosnia and Herzegovina. And of course, the religious background is part of that fragmentation in the political system. I would, but nevertheless, not say that even if we would solve the political challenges, that then religion would be a big factor, and also not for integrating into the European Union, because if we look at it, we already have all these religions in the European Union. It's there, and it's also it's like geography. It's unlikely that one of those religions will suddenly vanish. They will be there. So it's simply part of the heritage that I think would also, again, a European integration would contribute to alleviating the situation and make it possible to coexist peacefully next to each other, if there is not too much interference from outside players.
Okay, so I hope that all of these Western European countries will peacefully cooperate in the European Union in not far distance what time concerns. So thank you very much, Sebastian, that you agreed to talk to me and share with me and people who will hear this podcast your immense experience and knowledge about integration process, which is still on the way in the West European in West Balkan countries, and that concludes our speech. So one more, thank you very much indeed for being with us, and goodbye. Thank you very much.